Hello, my friends. Jill Osborne from the Interstitial Cystitis Network. It is Sunday, April 3rd. Time is flying. Oh, wow, it moves so quickly these days. April 3rd of 2022, it's time for another scheduled live IC support group meeting. My purpose in doing these meetings is to make you so strong, so knowledgeable, so informed that no one can mess with you again. I don't want anybody to demean you, to insult you, to tell you that there's no hope, to tell you that this is all in your head. It's simply not true. Hello, Ruth. Hi, Becky. We are simulcasting on YouTube and Facebook. I'm not sure about YouTube. YouTube is being a little weird. We will see. Everything's being a little weird today. Well, we'll see. Anyway, we're simulcasting live on YouTube and Facebook, and this is our normally scheduled Sunday meeting. Normally, I start around 1 o'clock Pacific time, and we go for a couple of hours. Sometimes we go really long, sometimes we go short. Hi, Lisa. Hi, Boria. Hey, Kayleen. Normally, when I do these meetings, I usually do a little intro, a little 20-minute intro with something, and then take your questions. Don't really have much of an intro today, but I do think that we always have to reinforce a very, very important concept here. And that, because I had a phone call today from a woman who was really struggling. And if you're watching, I'm thinking about you, honey. I know how frustrating it is. Very, very frustrating when you've been up all night. In fact, I was up all night 2 nights ago. I had a really rare, really bad night, but it wasn't my bladder. I just had massive insomnia the other night. And so I think I only got 2 hours of sleep on Friday night. Really ridiculous. Hi, John. So anyway, when you're sleep deprived and you're not getting the good REM sleep that you need, and it's been going on for a period of time, it's completely normal to get frustrated, angry, despondent. You want help. The doctors aren't necessarily helping you with your latest flare. Of course, sometimes we're very good about suffering in silence and we don't tell our doctor that we're struggling. That's important. But ultimately, in the end, you have got to really understand the concept of cause versus effect. Cause versus effect. Your nighttime sleeplessness is the effect. The frequency is the effect. The pain is the effect. The urgency is the effect. And ultimately, in the end, you have to focus on cause. What is causing this symptom? Because you can spend years chasing the symptoms with medication, and the problem is you'll never get to the underlying root cause. We've got to understand and focus on cause. And so, this is where subtypes really matter. I mean, do you have Hunner's lesions? The single most common source of chronic long-term pain in the typical IC patient is untreated Hunner's lesions. So we don't just want you to do pain meds. We don't want you to do those therapies that might help lessen those symptoms as much as we want you to do the therapy that will heal the lesion so that you no longer have pain, right? You get it? IC subtype 2, bladder wall driven. That can be from estrogen atrophy, that from chemocystitis. Remember that nighttime urination is often a direct reflection of something during the day that's irritating you badly. So are you taking a multivitamin during the day? So a lot of times it's something that you think is completely innocuous. Like you've done it for years. It's been fine. But you have to understand is as we get older, especially in our bladder, especially for women, our bladder is not as resilient as it used to be. We don't have the estrogen that we need to build that nice thick coating of mucus. So that cup of coffee or green tea that you had in your 30s and 40s, all of a sudden in your 50s and 60s is actually quite damaging because your blood, and that's not a disease. There's no disease process. That's estrogen atrophy. That's aging, right? And so again, when we're thinking about that long-term chronic nighttime urination, is there something you're doing during the day which is potentially tweaking your bladder every single night? That 1 cup of coffee a day, that 1 multivitamin a day, that 1 cranberry juice a day, that 1 soda a day, that 1 sweet tea a day could easily explain weeks, days, weeks, or months of flaring at night. Okay. We look at IC subtype 3, pelvic floor driven. So, are your muscles so tight that they're restricting blood flow to your bladder, and thus your bladder can't be healthy? Hi, Callie. Nan, I'll get that question in a second. Number 4, pudendal neuralgia. I was working with a patient this week who had very, very, very clear pudendal neuralgia. She had pain when she sat down that was eliminated by standing up. She had pain. She had sciatica. She had pain shooting down her leg. She had burning in her feet. She had sciatica-like symptoms going down one leg. I think it was her right leg. And as I'm talking to her, I'm like going, okay, tell me where your pain is. She's like, it's in my bladder. No. Where more? Be more specific. Is it to the left? Is it to the right? Is it centered? Is it low? Is it high? Is it inside? Is it outside? In her case, it was to the left of center. And I went, okay, that's not your bladder. Okay. And then she had other symptoms on the left side. And she's like, I'm like, that's not your bladder. Absolutely not your bladder. And okay, so in her case, despite all these incredibly intense symptoms, she had completely missed the most important thing, which was trying to figure out what was going on her left side. And then, of course, IC subtype 5, central sensitization. All righty, hold on a sec. So you guys, we have celebrity. We have a TikTok celebrity in the room right now, and that is Callie Krajier, registered dietitian, now working with IC patients who has IC herself. Her TikTok channel is hysterical. I wish I were as creative as you are, Callie. Nan says, do you recommend any Eucora product? The answer is no. No, IC is not infection. Eucora is designed for UTI. IC is not UTI. IC is injury or trauma. The Eucora products are just too aggressive for an injured bladder, and they're not helpful. They're not going to be helpful for somebody with chemocystitis or estrogen atrophy. Well, I take that back. Estrogen atrophy, if you're struggling with recurring UTIs, then you're probably also going to need to do something that will help prevent the growth of bacteria. We still wouldn't recommend Eucora. We would recommend instead a proanthocyanidin product, a PAC product like Allura or Prevent. Kayleen says, we have a surgery date. Yes. Kayleen has a surgery date. You're getting a B&B for the night before and the night of. I did find out that my uterus is introverted. Kayleen, holy hell. This is huge. This is huge. So your uterus is out of position badly. Remember, we've talked about that. We've talked about what happens when you get, I bet that you might have damage to one of the ligaments or something. Your pelvic floor is so bad. I wish I can cure it right now, but I don't have PT until the 19th. I've been so constipated since I don't have room. Oh, honey, I'm so sorry. Okay, so let me give you so this is hysterical. This is absolutely hysterical. I have found the perfect thing for me to do in the morning if I'm starting to feel a wee bit stopped up. You know what I mean? It's like I could really use a bowel movement right now. So what I do is I make French toast with Ezekiel bread. So I got 2 pieces of French toast, which is, egg and milk, mixed up really well, a little bit of cinnamon, coat the bread on both sides, fry it up in a little bit of butter, right? Okay, so I do 2 pieces of French bread, and I usually just put butter and jam on it. I don't like syrup, it's too sweet. Then I have a big cup of Dandy Blend, herbal coffee, right? So for those of you who still aren't quite familiar with this is now the raving herbal coffee that I just absolutely love. It's so freaking good. So you know how normally if you have a cup of coffee in the morning, people like to do regular coffee in the morning because it helps you have a bowel movement. Well, this will too. Even though it's not caffeinated, it will too, right? So anyway, so for me, I do my 2 pieces of French toast. I do a big cup of Dandy Blend, and then sometimes I'll eat an apple too. And usually within about 30 minutes, we're good, right? Things have moved along. Jill is happier. So my dad, my 99, so the other day, like 3 days ago, I was like, yeah, I could use some French toast this morning. So I made it for me and I made it for my dad. And I gave him a big cup of Dandy Blend coffee. And about 90 minutes later, he goes, man, I feel like I've eaten something that's just going right through me. Like, Dad, welcome to the miracle of French toast and Dandy Blend. Sometimes it's too good, and then you're stuck in the bathroom all day, which is not good. But anyway, Abby says, any new subtype 2 therapies coming out? I have really bad bladder and urethra inflammation. Well, platelet-rich plasma is going to be one. Low-dose naltrexone could be one. The patient I was working with today, again, her doctor did platelet-rich plasma, but he only instilled it in her bladder. He did not inject it into her bladder wall, and so she thinks that that was not effective. All right, so let's get back to Kayleen here. So anyway, Kayleen, try the French toast and the hot cup of something. You never know. And I'm going to be fascinated to see the positioning of your uterus. This could really explain so much of why you've been in such in good pain. I am so happy for you that this is coming up. It's about freaking time. Shayna says, good afternoon. Side question. I sent my contact information for the SME study reviews. However, haven't had any contact. Is this still occurring? I haven't had any contact about that. Hi, Tamora. Hi, Marta. Marta says, I'm 51. I just started hormone replacement therapy vaginally. I didn't have a thorough workup, but based on my age, Urogyne assumed it was menopause related. Yes. How does vaginal estrogen help the bladder? Well, it helps. It's going to help in two ways. Number one, the estrogen is going to, remember, the vagina is proximal to the bladder. So as the vagina gets estrogen, some of that estrogen is going to cross through to the bladder and it's going to help the bladder. Understand too, that a lot of times if you have urethral pain, they will also have you put a little bit of estrogen cream at the entrance to your urethra. Should I consider oral HRT? No. Oral HRT definitely comes with more risk. When you swallow estrogen, it is distributed throughout your entire body through your bloodstream, and that is where the risk of cancer comes from. So oral HRT has far more risks than topical estrogen. So the topical estrogen is usually where we want to go. Becky says, Callie Kerjer, I love your content. You had a really good one. Marta says, I use estrogen cream and it helps my bladder and urethra. Yep, give it a try. Kayleen says, I've been drinking water like a fish. So this definitely explains a lot. If I'm still suffering, just got to keep thinking I'm getting surgery. You betcha. You made it this far. You're going to make it another 6 weeks. You're going to do it 5 weeks. I have faith in you, my friend. I have faith in you. I know you can do it. And here, one sec. I need to give me a quick moment here. Okay. All right, let me get that out very quickly. So I have a question for you. What is your favorite icy-friendly breakfast? Now, I made our families. We have 2 favorite breakfasts in our family. We make Swedish pancakes, which are like this big, super thin, this big. But I don't really like eating that level of carbs in the morning. I don't want to be bloated all day. But anyway, Swedish pancakes are going to be a once every 2-month treat, or Christmas morning, something like that. But our absolute favorite breakfast is called Pretty Pretty. What is Pretty Pretty? This comes from Norway. And what you do is you hard boil 2 or 3 eggs. And then obviously in a saucepan, you need to make a cream sauce. You just make a very simple white cream sauce. Okay. When you get the eggs done, you peel them, take out the yolk, put it in a strainer, in a little strainer, and then chop up the whites. You chop up the whites. Okay. And then the strainer goes in a bowl onto the breakfast table, because that's what you top it with, is you mush the egg yolks through the strainer and you get this very fine powder of egg yolk. Okay. So now you got to pick your favorite bread. So for me, it's always going to be Ezekiel bread. So 2 pieces of Ezekiel bread, toast it up. And then once it's out of the toaster, chop it up into little squares so it's easy to eat. I mean, I do that because I've got elderly parents, so it's easy for them. Then what you do is you put your egg yolks on top of the toast, and then you put your cream sauce on top of that. Take it over to the breakfast table, and then you put the egg yolk on top, and then salt and pepper. I am telling you right now, the best freaking breakfast ever. I have eaten that breakfast for 60 years. All the grandkids love it. Everybody loves what we call in our family Pretty Pretty. So Pre-Leaf has asked me to write an article on IC friendly blogs. I mean, they've asked me to write a blog / article on IC friendly breakfasts. So we would be looking at like avocado toast. An omelet would be perfectly fine. You know, a cheese omelet would be fine. Most of the cheeses are now considered very friendly. Pancakes, gluten-free pancakes. I like to do gluten-free because, again, I don't bloat up with gluten-free. But what is your favorite IC-friendly breakfast? I need some ideas because I got to write that blog this week. Baby Butters on YouTube said, I was diagnosed with IC last year after I had my first flare. It was like every nerve got inflamed around my bladder, and I haven't recovered 6 months later. When I press down on my bladder, it's sore and there's pain. Is this the outside of the bladder, or can the pain be on the inside of the bladder? Well, it's hard to say, hun. If your IC is being driven by tight pelvic floor muscles, you pressing in that area could be pain from tight pelvic floor muscles. But if you also have a wicked sensitive bladder on the inside of your bladder, you pressing down could potentially cause some pain that way too. Baby Butters, how old are you? And I love your name, Baby Butter. That's great. How old are you? And can you remember any event that you think began your symptoms, that triggered your symptoms? Jennifer, thank you for the 100 stars. Hi, Bonnie. CMB, let's see. Hold on one sec. Marta says, I'm taking amitriptyline vaginally and it works amazing. I take it with baclofen and gabapentin all mixed in a compound. So that is true. That is called an Amibac cream, AMIBAC. So there are a number of customized compounded creams that can be used to help reduce vulvar symptoms, urethral symptoms, vaginal symptoms. Of course, we all know compounded estrogen can be used. An Amibac cream is amitriptyline, baclofen, and sometimes they put other things in it too. They might put a little steroid in it. They might put ketamine in it, a little bit of a ketamine cream to reduce nerve pain. They might, or you could do a lidocaine cream, something that will immediately numb the nerves of your skin if you're having pain with your skin. All right, getting back to Baby Butters on YouTube. I can't think of anything other than you had a history of UTIs and you took extremely hot baths for you. You know what? So did I. I took extremely hot baths too. I love taking hot baths, and I put some baking soda in it. In high school, I'd come home, because I was on the tennis team. I was really, really a really, really physical person back then, and I'd just be exhausted, and I would go sit in a really hot bath with baking soda. So whoa, wait, you'd spend way too long in the bathtub, up to 4 hours. Could this have caused problems? Well, that's a good question. I don't think so, because any damage that could have been done to that skin would heal, right? I mean that'd be a. I guess the question really is, would sitting in a hot bath for 4 hours basically trigger neuroinflammation? Would the nerves in your skin become more and more and more inflamed and activated? And I think the answer is yes, certainly it could be. Though I would expect that that would calm down after time. What baby butters, what I'm far more interested in is why. Now, the reason why I say that is because it wouldn't surprise me if the reason you gravitated towards a hot bath is because your muscles were very, very tight. And okay, and yet you say they've evaluated your pelvic floor 3 times and they always say it's not tight. Well, there goes that theory. Did you ever break your tailbone? You ever remember falling on your tailbone? Anything at all like that? Let's see. Marion says your symptoms have improved since you started HRT. Does Amivac cream cause weight gain? It shouldn't. Kayleen says, my Urogyne wants me to take gabapentin cream on my labia majora, but insurance doesn't cover it. I feel like it would be a perfect dose of gabapentin without the weight gain and other side effects. I agree with you. That would be really an ideal situation. Can you appeal it with your insurance company? All right, baby, getting back to the reason I used to take baths is because I was so cold all the time and I had problems regulating body temperature. Oh, that makes sense. Are you low thyroid? Your IC came out of the blue after you moved houses, but I moved back and it's still just as bad. And I don't think it was anything in the house. So we had one case where we had a woman who developed IC after moving. And it was a very slow but gradual process, and she got sicker and sicker. And then other members of the family started having a few other issues, not IC related, but obviously something wasn't quite right. And when they looked up under the carpet, there was black mold everywhere. Everywhere. There had been a long-term leak in a water heater that went into the foam underneath the carpets throughout the entire house. It was black, toxic black. And so one of the symptoms of black mold can be frequent urination and urinary issues. And so they had to move out of the house. They were renting the house, I think. They moved out of the house and they just had to move somewhere else. The house was probably irrevocably damaged. It would have required removing floors, removing a baseboard around the entire house, anywhere that the water could have gotten into the drywall and wicked up the drywall, right? So that would be one thing. The other thing we would look at potentially is allergies. Is there an allergen, something that you're more sensitive to at the new house? Because if you do have a history of allergies are not just manifested with sneezing and coughing and a nasal drip. Sometimes allergies can be manifested with more frequent urination. It's very common for IC patients with allergies to flare during allergy season. So Baby Butter said, one weird thing is a friend visited me and immediately came down with mono Epstein-Barr. Read there's a connection with EB and IC. It's so weird he came down with it being around me. Well, mononucleosis, also known as the kissing disease. So if you were kissing, that would potentially explain it. Let's see. So if insurance won't cover compounded cream, talk to the pharmacy and see if they have a low income program or some sort of program, a patient assistance program for patients who can't afford or might not be able to afford it. You never know. The squeaky wheel gets the grease. You can call and just say that your doctor would like you to try this new one for your very, very severe pain. It's not covered by insurance. Is there any way you can give me a discount on it? Or are you aware of any local patient assistance programs? Sometimes there are health nonprofits in the area that can come in and pick up the tab. I have one friend who lives up in Minneapolis, and I'm telling you, she is the goddess of finding really good low-income programs for people and for herself. She's got some very, very serious health conditions, and it's amazing when you just ask that question, is there any resource that you know of that might be able to help me with the cost? They might have some ideas. And don't hesitate to actually call, and don't just talk to the person running the register. It's not a bad idea to actually talk with the owner of the pharmacy and just say, are you aware of any programs that might help me with this? I mean, the good news is Congress just passed the bill that would make insulin under $50 instead of however high it is right now. And it's shocking to me that 120 plus Republicans voted against that. The cost of medications is way, 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 way too high. We need to take the profit out of this because you need care. And I think the great tragedy here is that we're just suckers here in the US because the same medication made at the same plant up in Canada might be $15, where here it might be $200 just because our pharmaceutical industry overcharges us. The same is true with gasoline. The cost per barrel of gasoline is actually fairly low. The reason why gas prices are high is because they're greedy. They're using this as an opportunity to make extra profits. All you got to do is look at the profits for the gas industry in the last 2 years, and it's shocking what they've done. They don't care about you. And it's not President Biden's fault. It's pure greed. That's all it is. Baby, I agree with you. Minnie says, I've been having issues for about 2 weeks, not long, I know, but I have a negative urine culture and one course of antibiotics did not help. I have another appointment with my primary care tomorrow. Any advice? Minnie, how old are you? Need to know how old you are, hun. And do you have a history of bladder issues? Have you had a history of recurring UTI? Marta says, so if this IC subtype is due to menopause, should I still benefit from bladder wall supplements? Absolutely. That's when bladder wall supplements really help because you don't have that nice thick coating of mucus in your bladder anymore. So taking something with chondroitin in it will help to coat your bladder and protect your bladder. So bladder builder, bladder rest, Cystro Protect, Cystro Mend would be the ones you would really want to look at. So Minnie says you're 31. Nothing, no history. This came out of the blue. Minnie, had you been traveling? Was there any sort of trauma? Anything that happened? Someone, I agree with you, hon. Well, no, I don't agree with you. I think that the number one cause of poverty is actually oligarchs. When you think about the oligarchs in Russia, the billionaires in Russia, well, the great majority of people, can barely buy food. It's that that 1 or 2% of people who are taking all the money and they're leaving everybody else in poverty. The way you prove that is all you have to do is look at Walmart and you look at the employees of Walmart are not, the last time I read about it, were not offered health insurance. They expect them to do Medicaid. They expect the government to pay for the health insurance of their employees when they are making billions of dollars every year in profit. Those are the real problems. Minnie said nothing out of the blue. All right. So Minnie, did you start birth control? Had you started a new form of birth control in the last month? Someone, I disagree with you. She says government programs are created, keep your mind under control. I completely disagree with you. I completely disagree with you. Social Security was created to prevent medical bankruptcy, not to keep anybody under control. This is to help people who simply cannot survive once they become ill, that they don't have a way of supporting themselves. That's why we have supplemental security income and Social Security. Minnie says, nope, nothing. You just upped your over-the-counter vitamins. Aha! So that's a clue. So the problem with vitamins, is if especially Centrum's one-a-days, go get the bottle of the vitamin and look at the vitamin C and tell me, is it ascorbic acid? Because you may be whamming your bladder with a massive level of ascorbic acid, which is quite irritating. Well, someone, I disagree with you, hun. I disagree with you, but we're here to talk about medicine and for vaginal atrophy and having months of IC as a result. But once you started estrogen, you've never felt better. I guess the question is, will pool water trigger a UTI? Don't want to open a can of worms. Okay, so Minnie, there you go. Back off on the vitamins. Back off on the vitamins. Centrums or one-a-days are just sometimes just too irritating to the bladder. That we would call that IC subtype 2 chemocystitis, where your bladder is being injured by a chemical. Okay, all the issues that they've documented and observed with patients or with people who are injured in pools. And so rule number one is no hotel pools at all. No hotel hot tubs at all. At all. The great majority of infectious outbreaks, according to the Center for Disease Control, were related to public pools like that. If you have a private pool, or if you have a neighborhood pool where there aren't quite as many people swimming in it, that might be better. So concept number one is how many people are using the pool. Concept number two is how are the chemicals maintained. We have patients who have gotten UTI because the chemicals are really quite low and they're not high enough to kill the bacteria and other things that might be in the water. And of course, we have the opposite. We have patients who have been bladly damaged by too many chemicals, far too many chemicals. I was one of those patients. That's what triggered my bladder pain, was a chemical accident. Although I had all the related conditions 10 years before that. So I want to know who's monitoring the chemicals. Saltwater pools are certainly better than chlorinated pools. If you have access to a saltwater pool, that would be great. Swimming in a lake, swimming in the beach. It's not what it used to be, hun. It's not what it used to be. Unfortunately, here now, like here in California, or if you're in Hawaii, in fact, I was thinking about this the other day. If you were to go to Hawaii and go to Honolulu and Waikiki Beach, and you're swimming in Waikiki Beach, you're either surfing, you're body surfing, or just lazing around in the water, right? You're thinking, I'm great. Then you wake up in the middle of the night with the room spinning, which is exactly what happened to me. What you don't know is that there is a sewage pipe that leaves the south side of the island and goes out a couple of miles. And then all that sewage gets flushed right back onto the beach. And so sewage-borne bacteria and viral infections are actually a public health problem in Hawaii right now. And they have been for years. And that same is true, in other coastal communities. We have periods here in California where beaches are closed because of high coliform counts, high bacterial counts. So, you got to maybe call the health department, make sure the water's okay, make sure that there aren't any issues. You certainly, one of the things that they're very clear on now is you want to not go in the water if you have any cuts on your feet or on your legs, because anything in that water is going to go right into those wounds. And so that's another way that people have gotten sick walking on the beach or gotten pretty severe infections walking on the beach. So I tend to have a lot of kind of cuts anyway. And so for that reason alone, you're really probably not going to see me swimming at the beach. You just, you got to read about it. You got to maybe call the health department in the area and make sure there aren't any issues. It's kind of, unlike 50 years ago. Well, 50 years ago, I think the sewage probably would have been worse. We're a lot better now with sewage. We're a lot worse now with chemical toxic exposure in water. So for swimming in the ocean, again, the big thing in Hawaii is all the water immediately off of Waikiki is often massively contaminated with sewage because they dump their sewage into the ocean, and the tide just brings it right back into the beach. So I would do a little bit of a Google research on where you want to swim. Now, for example, one of my favorite places where I've ever been to the beach is Coronado down in San Diego. That's where they train the Navy SEALs. That's where the Grenions are. The Grenion hunt at night is a couple of times a year where the Grenion fish wiggle up onto the beach and lay their eggs, and that's always really fun to watch. So I have swum there, and I haven't had any issues. But if the water is brown and murky, I don't know. And of course, not to gross you out any further. But we do have the brain-eating amoeba, which is, it's true. We had a guy up in Lake County, up at Clear Lake, who died of the brain-eating amoeba. When water gets really hot and the overall temperature of the water increases, and it's found especially in the South, like in Texas, at pool parks and something like that, if it's not properly chlorinated, that you sometimes get this amoeba growth, and then it actually literally makes its way to your brain and kills you, and there's no cure for it, as far as I know. I might be wrong on the cure, but I'm pretty sure there's no cure for it. So anyway, not to be Debbie Downer here, but again, just do your research. You call the health department of the county where the beach is and see if they have any issues. And if they don't have any issues, go for it. And take a shower afterwards, whether you're in a pool or whether you're in the beach. Get out of that swimsuit as quickly as you can. Take a shower and try to rinse whatever's on your skin off. And of course, go ahead and urinate afterwards too, to get any pool water, any ocean water that might have accidentally gotten into your bladder out. I know people are going, how is that possible? Well, some swimmers actually do take pool water into their bladder. I did. It's this weird, strangeness. So anyway, and I have an article on swimming and the issues associated with swimming over on the IC Network website. San Marco, I agree with you, honey. Minnie says, my fear is it's my house. We moved here about 3 years ago, and ever since then, I've had weird health symptoms, increased allergies, joint pain. Used to be perfectly healthy before. Our basement has a history of flooding, so now I'm thinking it's mold related. Minnie, I'm going to support that 100%, hon. 100%. It's interesting for those of us who tend to be a bit more sensitive to mold. I remember when I was looking for an office for the IC Network years ago, there was this one perfect one-story office building that I thought would be absolutely perfect for the IC Network. And I walked in and I immediately knew something was off. Immediately knew. And then another tenant came over and I said, God, I swear, I'm feeling something off about this space. And he goes, yeah, the last tenant got really sick. And I was like, huh? And they go, yeah, well, because they used to process photographs in here. And there were a lot of chemical spills that are soaked up in the drywall that were making people sick. And so every tenant in that space eventually got sick within a year and had to go. So, and again, there are moisture meters that you can buy. I would go through your house, especially in the first 2 feet from the floor, and see if you can measure moisture levels in the wall. See if there's anything that's higher than normal. I wouldn't surprise me if you've got a little source of mold in there somewhere. Baby Better says, how do you find a counselor who can consult on chronic pain? Would I need to see someone who lists this specifically? Did it help you to do counseling? I'm so depressed from the IC. It's really good to find somebody that you can talk with. A chronic pain or a chronic health condition therapist would certainly give you an opportunity to vent, give you an opportunity to learn some new skills, give you an opportunity to just, you don't have to recreate the wheel. Many other people have been on this journey, and there are tips that they can share with you. And I would do that. I have no problem with that. San Marco said, is there any benefit to medical marijuana for IC? I've tried cheap CBD oil and it did nothing. Yes, we've done the largest and longest relax their pelvic floor, improve, et cetera, et cetera. Well, as San Marco said, I forgot to mention I purchased more expensive oil with THC and still nothing, but it's not the THC. The THC is going to offer no benefit at all for pain management. It's the CBD that offers the pain management effect. I can pull that study up. We can look at the data if you want. Be happy to do that. I apologize for being a bit of a downer on swimming. I have to be really honest. I really am not going to go into a pool unless it's a private pool. I miss swimming, but that's one of the things that hurt me really badly is I had a chemical injury from a pool years ago. Really bad chemical injury. They massively over chlorinated their pool, and I would have been blinded if I hadn't been wearing goggles. Everybody who swam the day got very ill, and I did too. And that's when my bladder pain started. So I'm very, very cautious with swimming. Very, very, very cautious. Marlia says, can you explain mast cells? I have seen people mention it often causing IC. I'm not understanding the concept of the cause and how it acts on the bladder. Well, mast cells are found throughout the human body. They're found absolutely throughout the human body. When you get a mosquito bite and that mosquito lands on your skin and injects its venom into the skin, that then activates mast cells in the area which release histamines. And histamines are what make it itchy, painful, and swelling. So one of the ways we used to describe IC 25 years ago was that it's like 100 mosquito bites at once in your bladder wall. Think about, and Boris says swimming always killed me. Yeah. Think about if you fell and, okay, you know what happens if you skin your knee, right? So let's say you fall on concrete or on a street, and you now have a skin knee. So there's lots of little tiny wounds in there. Well, that's one of the things that sometimes happens in the bladder is that there can be lots of areas with just little tiny wounds. And so urine gets into those wounds just like a mosquito injects venom. And so wherever that urine gets into the bladder wall, that's potentially going to cause mast cells to release histamine, which then is going to cause the redness, the irritation, the pain, et cetera, et cetera. And so using an antihistamine is actually an important way of getting you out of the vicious cycle of bladder wall inflammation. So it's not about the underlying when the bladder. So let's say that you have. Let's just say that you got and eventually the acid started to erode your bladder wall. Okay. So now we have a damaged bladder wall. Urine is now getting into those wounds, causing mast cells to release histamine. That's bad. The histamine then damages the nerves and irritates the nerves. So now these super irritated nerves release something called substance P, which is even more damaging. So now we've got the nerve saying, help me, help me, help me, releasing substance P, that you out of that vicious cycle of superficial irritation, inflammation. And so doing the antihistamine can deactivate that. It can calm that part of that cycle down so that it's not so irritated. And you know what happens is you just get stuck in this vicious cycle, this terrible vicious cycle that builds and builds and builds and builds and builds. And before you know it, damn, you're peeing every 15 minutes, every 20 minutes. And so obviously following the diet is important, so you're not pouring more acid into the wound, but we still have to deal with now this vicious cycle. So that's why they recommend hydroxyzine, also known as Atarax or Visceral. That will calm part of that cycle. And then they might also recommend amitriptyline, a low-dose antidepressant, which will calm the nerves down. And so sometimes what you have to do is you've got to do that for 3 months. You maybe use some of these medications for 3 to 6 months to just try to get your bladder out of that vicious cycle. Tamura says, can you stop taking antihistamine? Sure, sure. You know, you just have to see how you're doing. San Marcos says, the audio video froze. Okay. You only heard THC will not help. I plan on seeing a medical marijuana specialist here in Central Florida. Okay, so THC offers no pain management benefits. So you're always going to be doing something that's focused on CBD. And the thing you want to work with that specialist on is, number one, the form. Most IC patients prefer edibles as compared to smoking it, because the smoking itself will then cause more irritation in the bladder, because all those irritants from the smoke will end up in your urine. So an edible is usually preferred by IC patients according to our study. But you also want to look at test results, because here's the hard reality. A lot of marijuana is massively contaminated with pesticides and rodenticides. We had this very famous case in Southern California several years ago, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, of a man with a severe spinal injury or something like that. And he had been using medical marijuana regularly, very, very, very successfully. And then he went down to the dispensary, got some new medical marijuana, and he immediately felt different. And over a period of several days and weeks, he started feeling like he was being poisoned. And so he had a hunch. He sent it off to a lab, and it was massively contaminated with pesticides. Massive. He was being poisoned. And clearly, whoever got that marijuana bought it from an illegal grow where they were using, really harsh chemicals. That's why illegal grows are so devastating here in California. Terrible on the environment. So he called the TV station, said, hey, this is an issue. I think you need to explore this. The TV station jumped on it. They bought samples from dispensaries all over Los Angeles County, and they had them tested. And the vast majority of them, including those labeled organic, were massively contaminated with cancer-causing pesticides and rodenticides from rats to kill rats. And so the moral of that story is, whenever you're going to buy medical marijuana, you need the lab results, and not just a website that says it's safe. Man, you want the lab results for that batch. With supplements now, understand with supplements and all of these things, they're a whole new level of testing. Man, you've got to track every ingredient. You've got to test every ingredient. Then when the product is made, you have to test it again to make sure that there are no contaminants in there. That's what all the new supplements have to do. That's one reason why Bladder Builder has been so late, is they were waiting for test results for collagen. So I think it was collagen. So anyway, if you're considering medical marijuana, you want the lab results. You want to look at it. And remember, San Marco, that if your medical marijuana specialist is a doctor, cool. But if this is somebody who works at a dispensary, they still have an underlying objective to sell product. And so they might minimize that risk. And I'm telling you, living in Northern California, I live in Sonoma County, Mendocino County, the center of marijuana growth on the West Coast is just, 25 miles away from where I am right now, maybe 30 miles. So this is real. This is real. This is something that we're seeing. The other thing that's kind of going on right now in that industry, just so you know, is it's overproducted now. And so all the people, the companies that have been tried to create new product lines are struggling to sell because there's so much on the market. Also, at the American Urology Association meeting a couple of years ago, taught by Robert Evans, Robert Moldwin, and Jennifer Fariello Moldwin, they taught the course on IC and pelvic pain. And they specifically mentioned a company called Fair Winds Cannabis. They're based up in Washington, and they make a vaginal CBD and a rectal CBD. And they said that they had good results with these medical marijuana products. So in addition to an edible, there is the possibility of doing it in supplement form. But again, it's all about the test results and going very, very slow. Bonnie says medical marijuana makes you tired all day. Jessica J says, is it true that collagen is often contaminated with heavy metals too? I think at this point in time, the big issue right now is, especially with the pandemic, is getting raw ingredients because the supply chain is really, really slow. And a lot of stuff comes from China now. And you can label something organic grown in China, even if it's grown in soil that's massively contaminated with heavy metals. There have been China has destroyed their soil, absolutely destroyed it. And so Natural Approach Nutrition, the company that makes Bladder Builder and Bladder Rest in Peoria, when we first started working together, we both agreed we were going to do everything we could to avoid any raw ingredients from China. The challenge is that there are a couple of ingredients that you can only get from China unless it's really, really, really expensive. But he's managed to take out any possible Chinese ingredients in, I think, pretty much every formula. One formula, Cystomend, might have had one ingredient that they removed. But even if they do get the ingredients from China, when it arrives at the factory, it's tested for quality. It's sent to a lab to look for contaminants. And again, once a product is assembled, it is also tested again. So testing at every step. Allison said, I wish I could try that, but for some reason, CBD doesn't help me. But it's possible. And we're all different. CBD is not something I've turned to. Although I tend to have I don't have bladder pain anymore. Really, my pain is really all in my left butt cheek or in my pelvic floor now. And so I'm very big about using topical pain relievers. Where is it? Is this one? As you can see from I have to wear my compression thing. That is because of my discs in my back. I have a femoral nerve injury. So my femoral nerve, if I don't wear a bandage, it feels like there's a tight thing around there's a tight belt around my thigh. But if I put the compression bandage off, it goes off. Anyway, listen, this is my go-to. I love Tiger Balm. I love Tiger Balm. So for any pain in your butt cheek, in your leg, in your arm, Tiger Balm is wonderful. And then this is another one, Spectrum. I don't know if you can see that. There you go. Is it focusing? Spectrum CBD pain salve. And we get this from Colorado, from the same company that makes our low acid jams and jellies, Colorado Mountain Jams and Jellies. They also have a company called Spectrum Botanicals. And so they make CBD products for people who struggle with pain. Benita says, my red blood cell count are low, so your doctor's testing for B12. How can I take this safely and not cause a flare? B12 is fine. B12 wouldn't irritate the bladder at all. I take it every night. The B supplement that can irritate the bladder is B6, not B12. B12 is fine. Jessica correctly says smoking medical marijuana can contribute to COPD. Absolutely. It certainly can. So again, B12, fine. Absolutely fine, Benita. No hesitation there. Just don't do a B complex with B6 and B12. Just do the straight B12. Ann says, can you have IC without bladder pain? Sure. If you've got frequency urgency without pain, what is that? So remember, interstitial cystitis as a word is fairly meaningless. You know, they started using the term interstitial cystitis about 100 years ago because they thought it was a problem with the interstitial layer of the bladder wall. It's not. And we've known that for 40 years. Interstitial cystitis is indeed the wrong name for this. This is why this is now being called bladder pain syndrome or hypersensitive bladder syndrome in the great majority of countries in this world. But so the other problem with quote unquote a diagnosis of IC is that it's a grab bag diagnosis. It doesn't really mean anything. It doesn't really mean anything. It doesn't tell you what the underlying problem is. And that's why we do something called subtyping, because we've got diversity in this patient population. For some of you, IC begins in childhood, while for others, IC begins after menopause. Are you biologically, anatomically, pathophysiologically the same? No, you're not. You're not. Those patients are very, very different. For some people, IC begins after having a baby or falling on their hip or their tailbone. While for others, IC begins after chemotherapy. Are they the same? Absolutely not. Now we know why the more than $100 million put into IC research has failed, because you can't put apples, oranges, and bananas in the same research study and expect success. And finally, in the last year, we've known this for a decade, but understand the powers that be, especially here in the United States, are very, very conservative. And a couple of years ago, they decided they were still going to put everybody in the same research category. Well, now they finally admitted they can't do that. That there are some patients who are bladder-centric, other patients who are beyond bladder-centric. So if you have pelvic floor dysfunction, you're not going to respond to a bladder therapy. If you've got Hunner's lesions, you're not going to respond to physical therapy. Every presentation has its own unique treatments. So today it's all about subtyping. So it's all about what type of IC do you have? Is it bladder wall? Is it pelvic floor? Is it pudendal neuralgia? Is it central sensitization? And of course, we really have to talk about why do some of us get multiple pain conditions? Some of us have IC, IBS, vulvodynia if you're a woman, I call it rectodynia if you're a man or a woman where you have rectal pain, fibromyalgia, super sensitive skin, a wicked sense of smell. We can smell things that other people can't smell. We knew back in the 1990s that some IC patients had a ridiculous sense of smell, and I'm one of those. And UC Berkeley, researchers at UC Berkeley were trying to figure that out because smell is a brain function. It's a brain function. Smell has nothing to do with our bladders. It's a brain function. So now we know that patients who get IC, IBS, and these other related conditions, it's not like you have a bladder disease and a bowel disease. You have a central nervous system issue. And I'm in this group. It's a central nervous system driven thing. And the odds are you also have massive anxiety disorder, because that's a sign that the central nervous system is driving this. And so for patients with multiple pain conditions, we are now focusing strongly on the central nervous system and what can we do to get that brain out of fight or flight. What the research shows is that patients who have multiple pain conditions, their brain is stuck in fight or flight. So let me explain this. So we're talking the most primitive part of your brain. There's no cognition happening here. This is the part of your brain that its whole purpose is to save your life. And the way that it does that is it tries to pay attention to your senses. What do you see? Is it a tiger or a fire? Or is it a rose? What do you hear? Is it screaming or is it singing? What do you smell? Is it smoke or is it perfume? What do you taste? Is it poison or is it chocolate? What are you touching? Is it hot or is it cold? Right? So what the research studies have shown is that a normal process of this section activating and then turning off is not happening. So if you were to open your front door and you were to see a saber-tooth tiger across the street, your sympathetic nervous system immediately takes charge. There is no cognition. There's no thinking your way out of this. You see a saber-tooth tiger. You see something that could kill you. And so what happens is that takes over. The amygdala in your brain turns on. Your body is flooded with adrenaline that raises your heart rate. It raises your blood pressure and it tightens your muscles because it's preparing you to fight or flee, right? That's, again, how your body protects yourself. It's the most animalistic, primitive part of your brain. Now, normally, let's say the hunters came and they captured the saber-tooth tiger and it is long gone and you're now safe. You would look out there, it's gone. Your parasympathetic nervous system would take over and it would turn off that fight or flight response. It would reduce your blood pressure. It would reduce your heart rate. It would relax your muscles. And that's normal functioning. On a day-to-day basis, your parasympathetic nervous system's in charge 95% of the time. Fight or flight, sympathetic nervous system should only be involved in moments of extreme stress, extreme fear, right? But for the patient with chronic overlapping pain conditions, it's reversed. It is the fight or flight that's now controlling day-to-day activity. And that's not a mental illness. Nobody's saying this is mental illness. This is kind of a central nervous system injury. They call it a maladaptation. But the good news is we know exactly what to do. We just have to get your brain out of fight or flight. We can do that in 5 minutes. Absolutely do that in 5 minutes. And so bladder therapies are not going to help that person. What we've got to do is we've got to calm that brain down, reduce that muscle tension, restore normal blood supply, reduce that anxiety so that we got some good, healthy, normal brain functioning. And we can do that if you want a little bit later. We can do my favorite technique called I Spy, which I promise you will get you out of fight or flight in 5 minutes. And you'll stay out of fight or flight for hours. Because the challenge, of course, is that there's a lot of stressors in our daily life right now, and there's a lot of negative thoughts from all the stress. Brenda says, I can't smell nothing because of a broken nose from an abusive marriage. My mom, even though she's very sensitive, she was a smoker, so she can't smell anything either. I smell everything. Marlia says, what does help with retention without irritating the bladder? A pelvic floor therapy. The question is, why do you have retention? Do you have retention because your muscles are super, super tight and they're not relaxing enough to let you pee? Or do you have retention because you have a nerve issue? We have to understand the underlying cause of retention. Usually, it's because of tight pelvic floor muscles. Thus, the correct therapy is pelvic floor physical therapy to get those muscles relaxed again. Amanda says, after a UTI, what does that mean? Well, Amanda, understand that the bladder only knows one language: frequency, urgency, pressure, pain. So everything feels like UTI. A bullet wound feels like UTI. A stab wound feels like UTI. Chemical injury feels like UTI. Cancer feels like UTI. You only have two distinct nerves in the bladder. One that gives you frequency, urgency, one that gives you pain. So the only way that the bladder can communicate to you that there's a problem is by giving you frequency, urgency, and or pain. And yes, you think it's infection. Those are the symptoms you associate with infection. But the proof is in the culture results, right? Or in the next generation DNA testing results. The vast majority of us, we all thought, myself included, we had infection. I thought I had infection every month for the first 3 years of my IC. It never was infection, never. It was bladder wall injury combined with pelvic floor tension. There's one exception to that, and that is with UTI. If you, for example, are of a certain age where you are in chemical menopause, you're in surgical menopause from hysterectomy, or you're in your 40s or 50s and you're in perimenopause, menopause, or postmenopausal, recurring UTI is common in this group because the loss of estrogen makes your bladder more vulnerable to infection, makes your bladder more vulnerable to UTI. And there absolutely is a group of patients who do get real recurring bladder infections every other week, every month or so. If you've had 2 infections in 6 months or 3 infections in a year, you would be in the recurring UTI group. And what the research into that group has shown is that about 24 hours before the bacteria arrives in the bladder, it's in the vagina, usually living quite happily in the vagina, And so from a therapeutic standpoint, not only do we want to do the antibiotic that will kill the bacteria, we have to also, they normally would give you an estrogen cream to use vaginally to improve your vaginal defenses so that your vagina does not become a safe haven for bacteria to keep giving you recurring UTI. Here, hold on a sec. This is a Dandy Blend iced coffee, herbal coffee. Put a little bit more water in it this time instead of coconut milk, but there's still coconut milk in it. Completely bladder friendly, no caffeine, no acid, works like a charm. Blend it up. You can make a frappuccino in it. You can make lattes with it. Fabulous, fabulous, fabulous. This is my new bag that I just bought for me. All right, so hold on a sec, YouTube. YouTube, are you guys okay? You're a little quiet right now. All right, let's go back here to Facebook. Marielle says, or Maria Lee says, why do urologists send us to pain management and then the pain doctors don't want to help? Well, because of the opiate crisis, many urologists now refuse to provide pain care because they don't want to be sued. They don't want to tangle with a law enforcement, because unfortunately, I mean, if you look at the opiate crisis and you look at what's happened with pain medicine in the last 20 years, a number of doctors have set up pain clinics, especially in Appalachia, where they just made a buttload of money. And so patients just came in, they diagnosed them with whatever, and they became a factory for prescribing codeine products and fentanyl and things, oxycodone. Usually it was oxycodone. Well, it was really clear that addiction was going up. It was really clear that many people were dying of opiate overdoses. And as they were trying to come to grips with understanding what was driving the opiate crisis, more and more of these doctors in these clinics were being prosecuted. We had a doctor up in Lake County who was charged with murder because he overprescribed, had a history of actually not Lake County, I think it was over in Sacramento County, consistently prescribing extremely high doses of pain medicines to their patients, and a patient died, and the family sued, and law enforcement got involved, and he got arrested. We have that case right now of this nurse who made a medical mistake, and she was just convicted of manslaughter, which now has doctors and nurses leaving medicine because mistakes also happen too. I mean, that was an innocent but tragic mistake. So once law enforcement got involved and started prosecuting medical care providers, they backed off massively. And I would say that the great majority of urologists do not prescribe any pain medicine now, any opiates now. They would send you to a pain specialist to do that. But then now we're in another problem, because there are pain clinics that are really sincere about wanting to get to the bottom of your pain, and they do nerve blocks, et cetera, et cetera. And there are other pain clinics who are, they call themselves pain clinics, but their underlying agenda is to get you off pain medicine. So we got to know the type of pain clinic you're going to and what their mission is. So it's very complex now for pain patients. And you as a patient, you can't walk into a doctor's office and demand pain medicine. It's the political environment is too hostile. You will look like a pain seeker. Instead, you've got to talk about functionality. The way you get around this is when you go to the doctor, you have to say, doctor, I can't sit at work more than 10 minutes before I have to get up because I have pain by my tailbone. Or doctor, I can't sit through a meeting at work because I have to get up and urinate every 15 minutes. Or I can't make dinner, or I can't do my laundry, or, you have to talk about how is your pain limiting your daily life, your ability to function. And then the question that you give to your doctor is, what can we do to improve my functionality? What can we do so that I can sit through a meeting at work? If you approach it from that standpoint, what can we do that will help me work better, that will keep me out of the bathroom? You open the door for them to say, maybe you might benefit from a little bit of pain medicine. So that's a very important way of approaching that discussion about pain care with your doctor. Also understand now that for those of you where you've just been cut off, and again, we've written articles on it. I chaired our California pain conference years ago that led to our governor signing our Pain Patients Bill of Rights. So this is an area that I'm fascinated by and very interested in. I've testified on this on the behalf of patients who needed access to pain care. The harsh reality, though, is opiates are challenging. I mean, it's shocking that patients recovering from hysterectomy are not being given opiates at times. And when I had to have my hysterectomy and I was one-on-one with my doctor, I said flat out, I will not do this without pain care, opiates. And he's like, fine, we'll give it to you. And I'm like, no. You're going to give me a prescription right now that I can take home and fill so that by the time I get back from the hospital, I will have the pain medicine in my hands. Because I'm not going to trust the discharge people at the hospital and the separate doctor at the hospital who might be responsible for that discharge to write that pain prescription. So I am crystal clear. If you're going to do it, you're going to give me a prescription now. I'm going to take it home and fill it. We have way too many stories of patients who were promised pain meds and not given them. But this is something that's really exciting here. Where is it? Oh, hold on. It's in another room. I'll be right back. All righty then. Peora. Okay, so The active ingredient is called PEA, like a green pea, or palmitoyl ethanolamide. That's the scientific name. So PEA has been used in Europe for decades for pain. There are dozens and dozens and dozens of research studies. It's a simple fatty acid that interferes with pain processing. It has been studied with surgical pain, acute pain, chronic pain, fibromyalgia, sciatica, burning mouth syndrome, you name it, it's been studied. And it has been found to be remarkably successful in reducing nerve-driven pain. I knew about this about 15 years ago because it was being imported. PEA was being imported by some pharmacies for IC patients here in California. The problem is it was extremely expensive, thousands of dollars back then. Well, the good news is that it's no longer that expensive, but 2 years ago or 3 years ago, in 2019, European researchers studied PEA with interstitial cystitis, and they brought the research to our National American Urology Association meeting, and it was stunning that PEA was remarkably successful at reducing pain in the IC patient, that by month 3, 87% of IC patients using it reported a significant reduction in their pain. And by month 6, I think 25% were completely pain-free using a combination of PEA and resveratrol. It's called UMP in Europe. Now, we can't get UMP here in the United States. So I brought that data to Natural Approach Nutrition, the company that makes Bladder Builder, and said, can you give us a similar formula to what was used in the IC research study? And he went, sure. And that's PEA. So this is palmitoyl ethanolamide, resveratrol, combined with vitamin D3, vitamin K2, a little bit of calcium, a little bit of magnesium. This, if you struggle with pain, absolutely worth trying. Absolutely worth trying. And the cool thing is, it's like the cheapest supplement in the entire spectrum of IC, other than Pre-Leaf. I think it's $28 now. Where most of the other supplements are in the 50s, 60s. So when people ask me what I do, this is what I take. I don't have bladder wall pain anymore. I have pelvic floor pain, and I have extremely sensitive skin, still to this day. Hello, redhead, right? I was at a dentist, and I was talking about how difficult it was to get numb as a redhead, and he was like, "Yeah, you guys are definitely challenging." So the way that my nerve sensitivity manifests is I used to get pinpricks in my skin randomly, especially trying to go to sleep at night. You'd be laying in bed and you feel a pinprick in your leg, and you go down there with lotion, try to numb it out, and then you'd be in your shoulder, then it'd be in the middle of your back, these random pinpricking. And it made it very, very difficult to go to sleep. I had a lot of difficulty going to sleep. And so I decided to try this to see if that would calm my nerve pain down. And by golly, it's eliminated my nerve pain. I might have one pinprick every 4 or 5 days instead of 25 or 30 every single night trying to fall asleep. And so this is viable for people who are struggling with pain. And don't just believe me. I mean, I will write out, let me just do this right now. I'm gonna spell out the scientific name. Okay, so YouTube, I just gave you the scientific name, and I'm gonna give you a link to the National Library of Medicine. PubMed.gov. Go over, copy and paste the scientific name, go over to PubMed.gov, and you type that into the search field, and you look at all those research studies. It's extremely exciting. The IC doctors who saw the IC data were thrilled that they had something that might help with pain that was over the counter with virtually no side effects. No side effects were reported in the study. And so Facebook, let me give you the scientific name here. All right, there you go, palmitoyl ethanolamide, and I'm going to give you the link to the National Library of Medicine, PubMed.gov. There you go. You copy and paste the scientific name, go over to PubMed, put it in the search field, and you look at those research studies. It is exciting to have something over the counter that has the chance of reducing some of your pain. Carol says, I go to the Franklin Pain Clinic in Massachusetts. I'm prescribed Vicodin 500 milligrams 3 times a day for IC and have lower back pain, IBS. I was referred by my prior doctor that was a pain doctor that retired. All right, so Carol, I've used Vicodin too. Never 3 times a day, other than when I was recovering from surgery. But the fact that you have IC and IBS puts you squarely in IC subtype 5 chronic overlapping pain conditions. And so that would be what I would add to your daily protocol here is, and understand with pain meds that, you know, one of the problems that patients make is if you have a severe flare, you decide, or you wake up in the morning with more pain, you go, oh man, I better take 2 Vicodin instead of 1. And unfortunately, what you're not understanding is opiate medication works at the spinal cord. And there are a finite number of pain receptors at the spinal cord. And so if one Vicodin will cover all of those receptors, the second Vicodin is a waste of time. So it's about using the lowest effective dose rather than the highest effective dose. The more you take, the more you're going to develop tolerance. Now, tolerance is not addiction. Tolerance is just your body gets very good at breaking it down. So you have to take more and more to get an effective result. So there's tolerance, and then there's something else that happens in there too. So listen, and Carol, again, Vicodin helped me tremendously, especially my first year. I suffered terribly because I did not have access to pain care. I was incredibly grateful when they finally gave me some Vicodin, and today it's now called Norco. Vicodin is 500 milligrams of acetaminophen combined with 5 milligrams of the opiate. Researchers decided that much acetaminophen was a greater risk of causing liver issues, so they reduced it to 350 milligrams of acetaminophen, 5 milligrams of the codeine. So Norco has taken the place of Vicodin just to try to protect your liver a little bit more. I would want to know what's driving your pain. Because you're treating the symptom, I want to know the underlying cause. What is causing that pain in the first place? Is it untreated Hunner's lesions? Because if it is, we need to treat the lesions. If you treat the lesions, the pain usually improves dramatically, and you might not need to use as much pain meds or any pain meds if you get the lesions treated, right? So I would always be asking at the pain clinic, what is driving my pain? Do I have a ruptured disc in my back? Do I have a Hunner's lesion in my bladder? Do I have a Pudendal Neuralgia? What is going on? I would like to try to, I'm grateful for the pain medicine, but I would really like to fix what's causing the pain in the first place so I don't have to depend on the pain meds, right? I hope that kind of makes sense. Mara Lee says, this condition is hell, 24 years of pain, and I'm not getting better. Mari, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. Is it Marlee? It's Mari. It's not Marielle. It's Marie Lee. Marie Lee. I apologize. Remember when you were diagnosed 24 years ago, and I was diagnosed 29 years ago, everybody believed that this was an incurable bladder disease. And so they threw DMSO at us. They threw Elmeron at us. They did bladder therapy after bladder therapy after bladder therapy at us, and they didn't work for many of us. And now we know why. because it's not a bladder disease in many of us, that it is something outside of the bladder that is victimizing the bladder, like tight pelvic floor muscles, or a fibroid tumor pushing on your bladder, or endometriosis attached to your bladder, or pelvic congestion syndrome, varicose veins, or something at the spinal cord like a Tarlov cyst, or a broken tailbone healed out of position, right? So you really need to now dive into the subtypes, because if bladder therapies didn't work for you and you've been in pain for 24 years, then it's not your bladder. It might be something beyond your bladder. Unless you have Hunner's lesions that were never treated, then that would be your bladder. But for the majority of us, it was a reading record. I'm going to see my urogynecologist soon, and how often do I go to the bathroom? And I'm sure they're going to ask you how often. If you go to the free download page on our website, go to icnetwork.org, go to self-help, go to the very bottom of the self-help link where it says free downloads. You should see a link to our voiding. Marley says there's a series on Hulu about DopeSec, about the OxyContin addiction. Oh man, I'm telling you, you know what drove the opiate crisis was, because when I was given opiates in 93, things were good. Then they lied to increase their profits. Uh-oh. Looks like we're having problems with YouTube. It says the connection is unstable. Okay. So anyway, so what happened is you had all these sales reps going to doctors' offices and going to all the conferences saying, OxyContin is safe. Give it to all your patients. And that's when doctors created the pain scale, to ask patients at every appointment, what kind of pain are you in? So that they would give OxyContin, right? Here, hold on a sec. So, so here you go. So now, yeah, Rhonda says the YouTube, it says there's a problem with the stream. Oh. Let's see if that makes a difference. So YouTube is on AT&T. Facebook is on Comcast. I have different internets to make this live stream happen. So let's see if that made a difference. All right, so getting back to this. So now we have tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of patients who have been given OxyContin for pain care, not having a clue that it was highly, highly addictive. And the drug addicts, the drug dealers quickly saw. They were onto it, far more quickly than the company. They saw that these patients were becoming very, very quickly addicted, and they started selling it more. And then you had doctors opening up pain offices and in strip malls. And that's really what has driven all of this. Now the company is been prosecuted. It's this whole thing where they're trying to hold the owners of the company who made billions of dollars on this. They knew it was addictive. They proved they knew it was addictive. They lied, and there you go. So once again, profit in medicine has damaged many, many people. I do believe that our healthcare should be entirely nonprofit. I do. It shouldn't be. Companies shouldn't be charging higher prices to pay off their shareholders. We need to go back 50 years, right? Jill said, how do you treat lesions? You treat the lesions with a steroid injection, or you treat the lesion by cauterizing the lesion, or hyperbaric oxygen therapy. If you come over to our website, icnetwork.org, we have a whole page on it on how to treat Hunner's lesions. Tamora says, what's the name of the product? It's called Peora. Peaora. You can find it in the IC Network shop. Liz says, can I recommend a gynecologist and a urologist in Sonoma, and in the town of Sonoma or in Sonoma County, Liz? If for Sonoma County in Santa Rosa, there is Dr. Susan. Oh God, what is her last name? What is her last name? Oh God, it was just right there and I just lost it. It's Susan. I can find it really easily. Also, it depends on your health insurance. So, Liz, are you in the town of Sonoma or are you in Sonoma County? Are you in Santa Rosa, Petaluma, Healdsburg? Hold on, I can find it. Susan Logan. Loved her for years. My mom goes to her. She's very receptive to patients with vulvodynia, patients with chronic pelvic pain. Love her. I don't know of any gynecologists in Sonoma that I have personal experience with. It looks like there are several. I think you need to go to Yelp. Go to yelp.com and look at the reviews. It looks like there are Sonoma Valley Hospital Women's Health Services, Dr. Paul Amara. The Prima Health Group in Sonoma has 4.5 stars. And I don't know of any urologists in Sonoma now. Usually patients have to come down here to Santa Rosa, which you drive right by my house if you did. Wow, urologists have really changed. Wow. Look at that. Anyway. There are a couple of really good physical therapists in Petaluma. One in Petaluma, a couple in Santa Rosa also that aren't too bad. I mean, Liz, for you to come to Santa Rosa, what's a 20-minute drive? Totally worth it. All right, guys. Any more questions? Any more questions? You're letting me get off easy today. I haven't had much of a chance to dive into the new IC research, to be quite honest. I've been very, very busy, and my aunt passed away last week, so the funeral is tomorrow. So I've been dealing with an extremely sad mom, and we've been trying to do as much as we can to help my cousin. I can't fly down because I can't leave my parents. I would love to fly down to, she lived in San Diego. I would love to fly down there and be with my cousin Susie, but I can't leave my parents, and I don't have any coverage for my parents. My mom fell the other night hard and hit her head. You know, I can't leave her. I cannot leave her alone. Just can't do it. She's 93. Thank you. Thank you. You know, there are those people in your life that are just joy. You know, they're just happy, just joy. My Aunt Shirley was joy. She loved visitors. She loved children. And even though she had several miscarriages and she was only able to have one child, and that was really heartbreaking for her because she would have been a great mom to like 5 or 6 children. We benefited from that. And so every time we went, we had adventures. And she was just fun to be around. I mean, she was so funny. We would make cakes and puddings and stuff, and she'd turn the beaters on too high and it'd cover the kitchen, and she'd be laughing hysterically, and she'd do it deliberately just to get us to laugh, or take the top off of the blender making lemonade or something like that. But we would go to the beach or go to the zoo or go to the show or go trail riding or I just, I'm so grateful to have had that joy in my life. Because as I've shared, where I grew up, we had a lot of violence, and I knew I could go to her house and have a refuge of just pure and utter happiness. And she's not she wasn't my Aunt Shirley for the last couple of years. She just was a shell of herself and not able to talk much and couldn't hear well and couldn't do, and just, she was ready to go. Once my Uncle Jim passed away, she was just hanging on by a thread. So we're just I'm just so grateful. I'm just so grateful for her love. And I'm sorry that she's gone, but I'm happy that she's not suffering. It was time. It was time. And you guys are going to be here for me. Remember, I'm caring for a 93-year-old and a 99-year-old, and they both outlived their entire family. And when my mom heard, and I had to tell my mom last weekend that her sister had died. Oh, let me tell you, that was hard. And I've been trying to prepare her for a month. It's like, Mom, she's probably not going to make it another couple more weeks. And yet, boy, when that moment happens, it's hard. And I walked out of the room because I was talking to my cousin Susie, and she pulled at my dad and she said, why did we make it? Why are we the ones who survived everybody else? And, my dad didn't really have an answer for that. My sister said, well, it's because you're there, Jill. I do think that plays. I've saved my dad's life twice so far. San Marco says, I have Hunners for 10 years, fulgurization and steroid injection did nothing. What is the next step for me? I'm in the process of setting up pelvic floor physical therapy. Well, San Marco, we have two other now important insights into what could cause Hunner's lesions. Hunner's lesions have been one of the great mysteries of IC, is what causes a lesion. Now, we've always believed that it was, when you biopsy a lesion, it's a biological warfare happening in the middle of that lesion. There's massive, massive inflammation in the center of that lesion. And if you biopsy it, that's what you see. You see a massive inflammatory process happening. So, number one, we assumed that a lesion was neuroinflammatory, that maybe there was a nerve in the bladder wall that was being badly damaged, releasing this substance P, which was damaging the tissue and causing that lesion. But about 5-6 years ago, the Europeans made a very interesting breakthrough. They were studying the urine of patients with lesions versus the urine of IC patients without lesions. And what do you think they found? Virus. They identified a specific virus called the polyoma virus. The polyoma virus is polyoma BK, polyoma JC, but they identified consistently in their patients with Hunner's lesions that they appeared to have an active polyoma viral infection in their bladder wall. Now, this didn't come as much of a surprise because polyoma viruses have long been associated with what we call hemorrhagic cystitis. And if you were to go to the National Library of Medicine, which I gave you the link to, you could find the research about hemorrhagic cystitis virus. You can just Google, you can search for it and you'll find it. So what's interesting though, is the polyoma virus is a virus that we all have. It's part of the normal human virome. So we've got the biome and the virome. And then we also have a I forget the word for the fungi biome, but there's a special word for that too. Normally, the polyomavirus is silent. It's not active. It gets turned on in people who are immune compromised. So hemorrhagic cystitis has long been documented in patients who have had kidney transplant, they're on anti-rejection drugs, or patients with HIV or other immune issues going on. And so this was exciting. Okay, virus. Now, what was so interesting is they had multiple studies showing polyomavirus, and our US researchers said nothing for about 5 years. And we're like going, guys, what the hell do you think about the viral theory? And they said nothing. Well, it turned out they weren't saying nothing. They were doing their own research. And guess what they found? They published their data last year. Polyomavirus in a small subset of IC patients, about 5%. So, San Marco, I think your next step is going to be to have a viral test. Ask your doc. You can get the research on our website. You can email me. I'll give you the links to the research studies and say, listen, doc, we've been treating these lesions for 10 years, not responding to therapy. Now we have some interesting new data that shows that it could be a viral infection. I'd like you to see if I have a virus. Because if you do have a virus, you might be able to use an antiviral. San Marco says you have a low white cell count, but very healthy besides the Hunners. Okay. So again, viral screen would be very interesting. But here's the other thing that was fascinating. And that was last year, we had a case study released of a woman who had severe Hunner's lesions, unresponsive to therapy, combined with a severe bladder prolapse. So when they decided they needed to repair the prolapse, so they went in surgically to do that, and they made a remarkable discovery that her uterus was flipped backwards. So the front side of her uterus was facing her back, and the back side of her uterus was facing front. So normally the uterus is held in place by ligaments, 2 ligaments. One of them was broken. So her uterus was swinging in place like this. And if Kayleen, if you're still watching, I have to wonder if the same thing's happening to you, right? So, what's happening here is you have a twisting motion of the tissue. The tissue is twisting. What is that doing? That is now, it's called strangulation. It's potentially blocking up blood flow and or damaging tissue and or damaging nerves, right? So here this lady, the back of her uterus was facing front was facing back. They fixed it. And something absolutely remarkable happened. All of her Hunner's lesions disappeared. She is considered a complete cure. Now, this supports the neuroinflammation theory that it must be a nerve here in this twisting area that has become massively inflamed. That inflammation is spreading to the other nerves in the pelvis, including nerves in the bladder wall, potentially causing the Hunner's lesion. So you can find that case study on our website, also in our blogs. The title of it's something like Unexpected Cure of Hunner's Lesions After Retention Surgery or something like that. So I can give you that too. So you need to be the squeaky wheel. I mean, if bladder therapies aren't working, then we want to look beyond the bladder and see if there's something else going on, right? So that's very exciting. And InterStim would be kind of a waste of time, in my opinion. I mean, why would you want to do InterStim? Yeah, it might help the frequency urgency, but we don't have any data at all that shows that InterStim would be helpful for a Hunner's lesion. I mean, have they given you any data that would be that? What would the male solution be on your side? Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know you were a guy. I would still be looking at structural injuries. Yeah, I think getting the viral test is not a bad idea. You know, we had another research study that came out last year or the year before that showed that a significant number of men who had quote unquote chronic pelvic pain actually had an underlying hip disorder that they needed to be referred to orthopedics. And that's absolutely a trend we see in our office. That the great majority of men who call me and work with me, I find history of pelvic trauma in their that led to the beginning of these symptoms. And I know some people disagree with this, but I'm telling you, in my office here, where I answer the phone, 90% of the guys I work with, absolutely 100% of the 90% have an underlying trauma, a history of trauma to their pelvis, to their bones. Tailbone injury, bike riding, motorcycle riding, history of football, history of if you were in the military, if you were a paratrooper, if you were playing football, playing soccer, anything where you might have fallen, ice skating, ice hockey. We look for a history of repeated trauma to the pelvis as it's one of the biggest risk factors for chronic pelvic pain in men. By far. And if you'd like to talk sometime, I'd love to talk to you next week. Feel free to give my office a phone call. Just go to the patient education line or the corporate headquarters extension, and I would be happy to share. I have an email for men that I work with a whole bunch of links. You know what? I might even be here. Hold on. Let me see if I can find it. Where is it? Here it is. No, I found it here. I'm going to give you a whole bunch of links right here, and I want you to read these, okay? So let me copy that one first. And these are case studies of men who have been cured. Hold on, a couple more. I would also encourage you and anybody watching to get our new book, IC 101. It's not just a bladder disease. It's the first book that talks about subtypes and goes into this in depth. I mean, at the interstim, that's a whole nother thing. But you could try the ankle stem, which is urgent PC, which does not have the risk of side effects. Ankle stem, they were both created at UC San Francisco. But the ankle stimulation is a TENS unit stuck towards a nerve by your ankle, and it doesn't carry the same surgical risk that the interstim does. Interstim has hundreds, if not thousands, of adverse events reported to the FDA. Thank you, guys. Thank you for your condolences. Much appreciated. Karen says, what about stress from corporate America, sitting in front of a computer for years, losses of loved ones? Did that put pressure on the abdomen? Yeah. Well, you're going to have position. So you've got a couple of different things going on there. Number one, if the longer you sit, the more you tweak your pelvic floor. And, when you're young and getting started, you might not notice it because you're very resilient. But 20 years of sitting in front of a computer, your legs are going to be weaker. Your pelvic floor muscles are going to be weaker. You're going to have tighter muscles, more restricted muscles. Very, very important that you get up and move around. That's why whenever I'm on the phone with somebody, I'm always up and walking around. I'm never sitting here at this desk. Having a sit-stand desk is really important. We have to keep that muscle health and our physical health good. And then we have to throw in stress, just stress in general. We are living in stunningly stressful times right now. And you have to, kind of as I was talking about earlier with the chronic overlapping pain conditions, you know, the way our brain is wired is extremely primitive, right? All it does, the part of your brain that's responsible for saving your life, there's no cognition happening. Zero, nothing. All it's doing is paying attention to your five senses. What do you hear? Is it screaming or is it singing? What do you taste? Is it poison or is it, something good? What do you smell? Is it fire? What are you touching? Is it hot? What are you looking at? Is it scary, right? When your brain gets input that it perceives to be life-threatening, you then go into fight or flight. The sympathetic nervous system takes over. And you are hardwired all day, every day, to be stuck in this process if you are in an abusive, stressful job. So 14 days of pain will put that brain into long-term chronic fight or flight. 20 days of bullying, including bullying of adults at work, will put that brain in fight or flight. God forbid you have a boss who, is a jungle fighter and minimizes you at every opportunity to get ahead, to make themselves look good, or if you have a child who has a bully, you are in fight or flight as soon as you get up in the morning and prepare. Your body is getting into fight or flight. It knows it's going into a setting where it perceives your life as at stake. Now, of course, the problem here is your life really is not at stake. It's not. The challenge of life in 2022 in the middle of a pandemic and a war, and with all the politics and everything that's been going on for the last 5 years, our brains are perceiving life-threatening stress several times a day. And so this is where we have to work on our own stress management skills. Because when you're in fight or flight, your brain intensifies the pain. It intensifies the symptoms because it wants you to take action. And pain that is accompanied by anxiety or tears or crying will be intensified. Pain that is accompanied by laughter will be minimized. Why? Because you're laughing. Therefore, your brain's going where your life must not be at stake because you're laughing. Laughing will help break you out of fight or flight. So nobody is saying that this is in your head. Nobody is saying that this is mental illness. This is a completely normal biological response to long-term chronic stress. And this is what underlies the IC, the IBS, the vulvodynia, and the anxiety disorder. Because if you've got long-term chronic anxiety disorder, if you're the no person rather than the yes person, hey man, you can't kid a kidder. I had severe anxiety disorder in my 20s. I didn't want to leave my house for a while. I mean, I did, but I panicked every time. I have shared that I grew up in my community with women being raped and murdered, including my neighbor. I was afraid to leave my house from 4th grade through high school. It was only when I went away to college that things got better or went down to my aunt's house in San Diego. There is a toll that takes on the brain over time. And that's manifested not only in chronic fight or flight, but also in severe anxiety disorder. You're the no person. Hey, Jill, you want to go to the beach? No, I'll get an infection. As we were talking about earlier. Hey, you want to take a drive? No, gas is too expensive. No, the drive will hurt me. Hey, you want to go to a movie? No, you're not going to pay me to go to a movie with COVID right now. Somebody with severe anxiety, you're the no person. Why? Because you're guarding. You're guarding. Your brain is guarding you because it thinks your life is at stake. So we've got to break you out of that because your life really is not at stake. We've got to give you better skills. It's called mind body medicine. And that becomes a very important part of this. I say past tense. I don't have anxiety disorder anymore. I took a class. I was like 35. I was having panic attacks every time I was getting ready to go to the doctor. I was sick of having panic attacks. I would walk around in my backyard crying before every doctor's appointment. And just one day, ironic since I already had a master's in psychology and I was trying to get my PhD, and yet I had no skills. I had no skills. And I just one day I said, this is ridiculous. I don't want to live this way for the rest of my life. I need help. I need to know how to deal with this anxiety. And I signed up for an anxiety management class, which 100% changed my life. I have not had a panic attack since I took that class. And I have a video on our website, IC and Anxiety, in our Living with IC video series. You can go watch it. And I explain exactly what they taught me in that class. And I double dog dare you to try it. It works beautifully. It's all about controlling fight or flight's adrenaline overload. Because every time you have a negative thought, you get a jolt of adrenaline. But Rhonda, it's not just counseling. I think that was one of the things that held me back. I could not change that my neighbor was raped and murdered. I cannot change that I was attacked multiple times. I cannot change the fact that I was rescued from a rapist in Connecticut one summer. The violence on women, especially back in the 80s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, but even today, was astounding. It is shocking. And no matter what counseling I did, even though I knew it was not my fault, even though I knew that I was the victim, I could not change the fact that my brain was stuck in fight or flight. It was mind body medicine that did that. It was the anxiety management class, which taught me a skill to make sure that I never let it build up to the point that I was in anxiety, that I would have a panic attack again. Skill building. When you go to a therapist, it's not just about talking about your history. And you don't have to talk about your history if you don't want to, although it's useful at times. It's about what can I do today to help lower the stress that I feel when I go to a work and I've got this arrogant prick who undermines me at every point, right? Skill building. Liz says, great point about the nervous system. Once did 20 acupuncture treatments for stress and it helped me for 6 months. We'll watch your anxiety video. Yeah. So San Marcos said, I panicked all the time, but had to suck it up for my employees. Thank you. Thank you. Being a business owner is hard. There has not been any period of time in the IC network. I've run this company for 29 years. We have 3 employees, just 3. We're a small business. We have many more contractors. We've got a half dozen more contractors. And knowing that there were people depending on me for their health insurance is important, stressful. And so running a business is hard. It's hard. And there are extra stresses associated with that, right? Like, the customer, I don't know if she's watching this right now. You know who you are and you need to stop it. You keep buying a product on Amazon, a supplement. You take it for 30 freaking days and then you ask for a refund. You say it's a bad product, but the next month you do it again and you take it for 30 days and you expect a credit. You do it again, 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months. You're buying product from the IC network and you're asking for a refund and you're taking it anyway. How dare you? How dare you manipulate the system that way? And we are trying to get you kicked off of Amazon. I'm letting you know right now, stop it. There are real life stressors here. Throw in the fact you want to know what my stressor is I got freaking subpoenaed in the Elmeron cases. You want to talk stressful? Seeing your name on a federal subpoena? Oh my God. I never thought that would happen, but I'm an expert witness. We did the research that we sent to the FDA to get the warning label on Elmeron because of the eye damage. Well, I'm a target now. Janssen Pharmaceuticals has decided they're gonna pick on Jill. Try to get me to shut up, apparently. How are they doing that? With subpoenas. You want to know how much that's cost me out of pocket so far? $15,000 in the last month. But in the end, it's not about you. It's not about me. It's the situation. And we have to, I don't regret a thing that I did in letting you know about the Elmeron eye disease. I do it again today in a heartbeat. I know I did the right thing in letting you know of the risk of eye disease with this medication. And I'm proud of what I've done. I'm going to stand strong. And I'm fighting for you guys. And I think in the end, we have to know who we are as a person, and we've got to follow our path and follow our dream and not let other people minimize us or demean us or insult us. You have there's only one of you, and you're here for a reason. Now we got to figure out what that reason is. You do. And let's do it. Let's do it. I hope that kind of makes stress. But so I'm not freaked out about it at all. It's just good mind-body medicine. Getting out outside, taking a lot of walks, doing deep breathing, doing I Spy, doing all those techniques that will keep my brain out of fight or flight. I am not in fight or flight. I'm not. Even with that, I'm not. So Laura says, I'm having a cystoscopy with hydrodistension and cannot find any information on my doc. He's a urogyno. Did you go to yelp.com? You can go to yelp.com to look at the reviews. You can also go to go to your state medical board and put the name of the doctor in, and that will tell you if there are any medical issues with that doctor, right? And talking with other patients. Laura, where do you live? Thank you for letting me vent. Venting is important. You got to have ways to get it out, right? You got to have ways to relieve the stress. Sharon says, thank you for advocating for us all. You're in Virginia. Okay, Sharon, it's my pleasure. I'm a support group leader, and I'm committed. I'm committed to wanting to try to help as much as I can. Laura says, you're in Virginia. So Laura, if you're looking for a pelvic floor physical therapist, there's a great website, pelvicrehab.com. I'm going to put the link in here. That is the link for finding a really good physical therapist who works with pelvic pain patients. For gynecologists and urogynecologists, you can check the database on our website. Angie's going to be updating it. She's done all the work. She'll be updating it next week. So we'll have a completely new and updated database. You can go to, here, I'm going to give you another link, the International Pelvic Pain Society. Whoops, hold on. They have a doctor finder. So you can look at their list too. It's under the from a patient area. Then there are a couple of other groups. We have lists to all of them over on our website in our How to Find a Doctor area. So always make sure that you start your search right here at icnetwork.org. I know websites are dinosaurs now, but that people want social networking, but you can't do a doctor list through social networking. So you want to look at our databases on our website. All right, I'm going to do a last call for questions. Last call for questions. We've been doing this for 2.5 hours. Actually, 2 hours. 2 hours and 10 minutes. Any other questions? Any other questions? Hit me. If you find these meetings helpful, please think about becoming a member of the IC Network so you get our wonderful magazine, the IC Optimist. I've got a couple of other freebies we're developing for our members, including, we started working on it yesterday, a brand new series called Best of the ICN, where I'm taking literally the best blogs and articles that we've done in the last 20 years and putting them together in PDF files or booklets. So right now I'm working on the diet one, and we're probably going to have 50 different articles on all things related to the IC diet, including a ton of recipes. And those are going to be freebies for our members, but we'll also be selling those online too, I think. John said, is there a good alternative to NSAIDs? Well, yeah, isn't that the pickle, right, John? I picked palmitoethanolamide, to be quite honest. They all have the NSAIDs all have their own issues, and there are some doctors who say that NSAIDs actually appear to they believe that it can make bladder wall issues worse. But I don't think that that's supported in research. Maybe one study, but NSAIDs are commonly used by IC patients. I think that the palmitoethanolamide is the good alternative, to be quite honest. Anne says, what's the link again? There you go. Yeah, pelvicpain.org. Well, pelvicpain.org is for the doctors. Pelvic Rehab is the most expansive listing of physical therapists working with pelvic pain and clinics that work with muscle issues and pelvic floor issues. And of course, we have a searchable database on our website too. All right, guys. Well, listen, I think I'll go ahead and call it here. I got a couple of things I got to do, and my aunt's funeral's tomorrow, and I gotta, there's just things I gotta do. So I'm going to wish you a wonderful rest of the Sunday. The Grammy Awards are on tonight. BTS is going to perform. Yes, my favorite young group. Forever young at heart. Forever young at heart. I might be 61, but I love K-pop. So you can see me again. We'll be doing another live support group meeting probably on Thursday on Facebook, maybe Tuesday on Instagram. I'm wide open this week. If anybody wants to talk, this is a really good week to reach out to me. I don't have any other extra appointments. And so this is a good time to reach out if you wanted to talk or do some coaching, whichever. All right. All right, guys, I'm going to call it. I will see you later. Y'all have a wonderful rest of the day and have a good week coming up, okay? Bye, YouTube.